Hello, Lovebugs. Welcome to another episode of Girls Night with Carley Doxtator. Today is a very special episode because today's episode features a woman whose courage and advocacy are helping shift the way we talk about trauma, justice, and healing. Sherry Bennett is a public servant, a survivor, and a powerful voice in the movement for trauma-informed care. After enduring sexual assault and a system that failed to protect and support her, Sherry transformed her experience into a mission to advocate for others facing similar injustices. She's the creator of the campaign When Your Body is the Crime Scene, which sheds light on the often silenced realities survivors face, both in the immediate aftermath of assault and in their long-term interactions with institutions that are actually meant to help them. Through her writing, public speaking, and professional work, she's become a tireless advocate for survivors of sexual violence and those living with PTSD. Today, Sherry is here to share her story, her insights, and her message of resilience, empowerment, and systemic change. This is a conversation about what happens after the trauma, about navigating PTSD, reclaiming your voice, and pushing for a world where survivors are believed, supported, and protected. All of that said, just a little trigger warning for the episode. We are going to be talking about sexual assault, sexual violence, as well as a few other triggering situations. So just listen to your body, listen to yourself. If you need to skip the episode, totally fine. If you need to fast forward through certain parts, totally fine as well. Just be looking out for your own well-being throughout the episode. But all of that said, please, everybody, welcome to the podcast, Sherry Bennett. Hi, everyone. Life can get a little crazy, so let's talk about it. If you're ready to dive deeper, talk about what really matters, and feel a little more empowered, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Carley Doxtator. I'm a life coach, baker, dog mom of two, and you're always there for you gal pal. And I'm so excited to have you join me. So grab your fuzzy socks, put on your comfy pants, and let's have girls' night. Hi, Sherry. Thank you for
Hi.
joining us.
Thank you so very much, Carly. I'm truly honored. I really am. I love to have these conversations, and yeah, here we go.
Yes, here we go. And we are so
Here we
honored
go.
to have you on the podcast
Yeah,
because
thank you.
if the intro did not do you justice already, you are such a powerful woman and such an inspiration for everybody that's dealing with these sort of issues, which for everybody listening, me and Sherry were actually talking before this, and we were discussing how a lot of people actually suffer in silence when it comes to topics like this because sometimes it's still a little bit taboo and people are a little bit scared to bring up the topic themselves. So I think it's so great to have you on, Sherry, just because you're someone that is able to shed light on that situation and let people know that they're not alone in the suffering.
Great. So I grew up in a medical family. My dad was a doctor. I have a couple of sisters that are nurses. My grandmother was a nurse. And in those days, we were, taught when I was raised to, if somebody died in the family, well, we don't talk about that anymore. Or if something, we were taught to suppress our grief and just, my Scottish grandmother would say, pull up your bootstraps and get on with it. Like in other words, get over it. But I think over time, I've learned that that's really an unhealthy way to go through life, to suppress grief and trauma. And turns out my dad died in 1988, a long time ago. He was under the age of 65, but he died of AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, Given the nature of his profession. And in those days, AIDS was a taboo subject. Nobody would come near us. We couldn't get doctors or nurses to come to the house to help with his caregiving. And so the short story is that my sisters and brothers and I did all the palliative care ourselves. I had my grandmother was a nurse. She helped us, but she ended up dying a few years later. And then my mother had bone cancer. So my sisters and brothers and I were doing palliative care for a period of, I would say, 7 years in total for all of our relatives. So that was although it was a privilege looking back to be able to help these family members, it was highly traumatic. And so I had two small toddlers at the time, children, both my children were under 3. And I wasn't doing well. I was suffering from a tsunami of grief.
Right.
And I didn't know, what to do with myself. And I knew that I wasn't doing my children any favors, of running around, not running around, I was laying around crying and,
Right.
under the covers, I call it. Really, really, I call it was a tsunami of grief. Absolutely, like one family member after another. And I had these two little children to raise and a very angry husband.
Right.
So I had a lot to balance. So I knew I wasn't doing well. And so I went to a doctor who was referred to me by a trusted friend.
Mm-hmm.
And he was supposed to specialize in grief counseling and whatever, who
Right.
knows. But this was almost 30 years ago. So the short story is I was drugged and sexually assaulted in his office.
Right.
So, so what do you do with that? This was, a long, long time ago. But I remember, you know, I didn't even have the words to describe what had happened. And how do I tell my husband? How do I tell my children? And I took a long time before I told my doctor. It was about 4 or 5 months after.
Mm-hmm.
And when I told her, that's what set the stage. So she had to, by law, report it to the College of Physicians and Surgeons.
Right.
And then I went through, a horrible trial. It was a civil trial that I did win,
Right.
but my judgment was something like $300,000 and the legal fees were $500,000. And that's a lot of money. And so it kind of wiped me out. This
Right.
was when I was, the assault happened when I was 38 years old. At
Mm-hmm.
that time, I thought I was so smart and I was able to be able to tell who's a con artist. I had really good intuition, I thought,
Right.
but you can't really protect yourself against somebody who drugs you. And
Right.
this is the case with so many women if they're in, a situation when they're in bars and they get their drinks spiked with what do they call it? Rohypnol or the
Yeah.
date drugs, that
Yeah.
sort
The
of thing.
rupees. Yeah.
Roofies, yeah, yeah. So, and often, of course, like I didn't have any proof.
Right.
So it's this a situation of he said, she said, right? And so it was 10 years in court and two in a civil proceeding, and then two parallel proceedings at the College of Physicians and Surgeons where I had to testify over and over and over again.
Wow.
And the doctor lost his license for a short period of time. But then, he got it back. And here I am left in the dust, after it was a horrible ordeal. The trial actually was highly re-traumatizing.
Yes.
Had to tell the story over and over and over again. And what they do is they it's victim blaming. They gaslight you. They say, well, what were you wearing? Good God. I was going to this guy for grief counseling. I used to
Right.
go in my sweatpants and
Right.
the lawyers are asking me what was I wearing to make this doctor do this? Ugh.
Right.
So these questions really haunt me to this day, what women have to go through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I, I can't believe this is such injustice. Like he got his license taken away 6 months, gets it back. Then when I dug into the research, I found out there's at least, at least 500,000 Canadian women that have been sexually assaulted by regulated healthcare professionals.
Wow.
Yeah, and then Canada, we're a much smaller in population here than in the United States, but that's a horrendous statistic. And mostly people that are in marginalized communities and people in indigenous populations don't get included in the stats. So I'm sure there's many more, people, women and girls, particularly men too, but mostly women and girls.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided how do I tell the story? And I've been doing it for ever since, for 30 years, just a little step at a time.
Right.
So it wasn't, and it still isn't easy, but with the right strategies and support,
Hmm.
yeah, one can survive. So
Yeah.
that is what I like to tell everybody. You really can't go through life alone. We can't go through business alone either, but with the right people and the right support,
Hmm.
it's entirely possible. And that's what we need more of us, to surround ourselves with people much smarter than us, but people that also may have had some lived experience and yeah.
Yeah.
So so I don't know, after the trial ended, that was about 20 years ago. I said, what the hell am I gonna do now? Because I
Right.
was in shock, repeated re-traumatization I'm in shock, still married, and my husband wants a divorce, and I don't blame him. I do too. And so the trial, I think I got divorced before the trial ended. Yeah. So I started volunteering at the YWCA. I worked in a women's shelter.
Okay.
Young Women's, I think the acronym is Young Women's Christian Association,
Hmm.
YWCA. And we'd plan events to help raise money for people who were escaping violence and women's shelters, that sort of thing. And then I volunteered at a funeral home, believe it or not, and I was a bereavement counselor.
Okay.
So I got to really be a witness to other people's trauma and pain. And for some reason, that helped me trying to figure out how to help myself. I was trying to figure out a way so I tried to help others, and I learned so much. I'm so grateful, really, when I'm looking back, because I'm the oldest of six, and I think the best gift my parents ever gave me was my siblings. They're
Hmm.
amazing. And by the time I was 30, I had already had no parents. Like my parents were dead, my grandparents were gone, no aunts, uncles. So I was the oldest living member of my family at age 30. And then this assault happened when I was 38. So it completely derailed my life. I
Hmm.
think if I hadn't gone through the system, I would have been a lot, I would have been saved a lot of horror. If I
Yeah.
could have found the right person way
Hmm.
back then, right?
Hi, Love Bug. I've got a juicy little gift for you. And if you've been feeling off, stuck in your head, or like your vibe just is not vibing lately, then this is for you. I created a free guide called The Three Secrets to Creating a Magnetic Energy Shift right now. And it's exactly what you need to start shifting your energy instantly. These are the exact tools I use with my private coaching clients when they're ready to stop chasing and start attracting. We're talking powerful, we're talking practical, and yes, of course, we are talking a little bit woo, but in the best possible way. In the guide, you will learn how to clear energetic blocks, activate your most irresistible frequency, shift into receiving mode, and there's even a bonus secret on how to use your body language to instantly boost your confidence and presence. So, if you're ready to feel like the version of you who turns heads, magnetizes opportunities, and walks through the world like the main character, then this is your sign. Head to the show notes and click the link to download your free copy. It is quick, it is powerful, and it is going to leave you feeling like, damn, I really am that girl. All right, let's get back into the episode.
I have a wonderful family, and and that's important, but so many people don't. So many women don't have the support and don't have the support of family, right? So that's when they call me. Somebody finds my number, and I've really helped countless women and even children as young as 6, little girls that I met when they were 6 years old. And now 2 of them are just talking about their trauma now
Mhm.
at 20 years old, like, years later, because you know, children and me at 38 years old, we didn't have the language to describe. I grew up in a family, my brothers, my grandfathers, my dad, I grew up in a family with really respectful men,
Mhm.
very respectful men. And we were taught that doctors are meant to do no harm. They
Right.
take an oath to first do no harm.
Right.
But there's predators in every profession, you know?
Yeah.
So we're seeing it. We're seeing it everywhere. And I recently did a podcast interview on USA Global TV and radio. And that's where we talk about how, it's mostly the perpetrators that get all the attention, like the Bill Cosbys of the world and the Harvey Weinsteins. And we have this horrible case recently in France with a woman, Giselle Pellicot. I don't know if you heard about that, but
Okay.
her husband drugged her and then offered her to 50 or so other
Oh my
men
gosh.
while she was unconscious, drugged. This was just recent, a couple of months ago.
That's
So I'm sorry to have to say these words because they are so horrifying. But often women, in this case, that guy,
mhm.
what's his name, Dominic Pellico, got charged because they had proof.
Right.
Most women don't have any proof. A lot of the intimate partner violence, domestic violence, and assault is behind closed doors. And so often women don't have but I would say if somebody comes forward and says that that has happened, step one, you believe them first
Right.
and don't rip them apart and ask them what they were wearing or,
Right.
that sort of thing. Anyway,
Yes.
sorry, I've been talking too much. I gotta
No,
let
no,
go
you've been
too.
talking the perfect amount of time. And you bring up some really good points. So, first and foremost, the fact that sexual assault, when people are asking about what you were wearing and did you lead them on, it's just
Yeah.
such an unfair question to ask people because time and time again, we've been shown that sexual assault is not about lust, it's not about attraction, it's actually about power and having that control over another person. There's this art exhibit, I forget the artist's name, that I didn't go to it in person myself, but I've seen it online. And she made an art exhibit. She was a survivor of sexual assault herself, and she put up all the clothing, the outfits that people were wearing when they were sexually assaulted. And for the most part, it is people in sweatpants, like you were saying, Sherry, people in baggy clothes. It's really sadly a lot of children's clothing, even little babies' clothing. And I think it's such a powerful art exhibit because it's showing like it doesn't matter what you wear, sexual assault happens because of power, and it has happened throughout history like that. When women were covered up head to toe in
Yeah,
clothing
yeah,
in those giant dresses that do not show
yeah.
your figure at all,
It
sexual
still
assault
gets,
still
yeah,
happens.
right,
Yes.
exactly. So it's something that has to be called out now. And so many women are afraid, rightly so. And I don't want anybody to ever go through what I went through, ever. And rightly so. So I'm trying to put words to the symptoms, the aftermath. I got a diagnosis of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, way back then, when my dad died, okay? And then this made it the diagnosis, it made it, they call it now cumulative, complex
Okay.
post-traumatic stress. And that comes, I don't know if you know, but that comes with nightmares and flashbacks and anxiety off the Richter scale. I'm always, even still to this day, I sit with my back to the wall. If I'm in a restaurant or in a meeting, I like to have I'm always on hyper alert mode.
Hmm.
And what well-meaning doctors do is they typically prescribe antidepressants and sleeping pills and whatever, painkillers. So I was on, I think, a tranquilizer called Ativan for about 20 years.
Wow.
And and that's just what they do is they medicate grief, doctors and well-meaning doctors, I'm saying.
Right.
But a lot of these medications can come with, I just felt numb. I felt like I was an autopilot. I felt like I was operating like a robot. Get up, drive my kids to school, but I wouldn't, get to work. It was really, I, I felt
Right.
no joy, and I didn't feel like a human being, for instance. I was just going, like the motions, like going through life, you know.
Hmm.
And so I started to do some research on medical cannabis because I heard through my volunteer work
Hmm.
that cannabis can help, with arthritis, with anxiety. And so I delved into the research. And to me, that's a really good coping strategy is to be able to read, understand. I
Mhm.
read books about the survivor personality. How do you, and how to, when the body says no. I've read all these books about, how, you know, post-traumatic stress, yes, I would say it's a brain injury, but
Mhm.
it's an invisible handicap because no one
Mhm.
can see, no
Right.
one can tell. If I'm in at work and I'm, maybe tired from the night before of nightmares and
Mhm.
things like that, right? So,
Right.
so the short story is I've been taking medical cannabis every day for about 10 years now.
Okay.
I take it in I consume it in all formats, like gel caps and oil. Topical cream is wonderful.
Mhm.
And and I'm a strong advocate for it because based on my education and my lived experience, I know that it's the only medicine that does not have the capability to kill people. And I love to
Right.
to talk about that because the other drugs have such horrible side effects. Like
Yeah.
we need the other drugs too. I mean, we need opioids. It's like I watched one of your episodes and you said you were talking about a broken arm. If you ever
Yes.
have a broken arm that needs to get reset, which I've also had experience with that too, you need fentanyl or you need something to put you out. The anesthesiologist will give you that, but short term. If some of my clients have had hip replacements, so
Mhm.
we need opioids then. You need pain management, but short term, 5 days. And then
Mhm.
after that, try to wean yourself off and
Right.
use other modalities to help with the pain. Because so many people are getting addicted now too. We have a horrible opioid crisis here in Canada, and you guys do in the
Yeah.
States too as well,
Yep,
right?
we do. Yes.
So,
Yeah, and I think the opioid crisis, I think, is coming more forefront too, and the bad effects that that can have
yeah.
long term. So I think, as you
Mhm.
said, medical cannabis is such a great alternative for things like this. So I'm actually interested. How exactly has medical cannabis played a role in your healing? And I guess more specifically, where have you seen the biggest uplift in your journey since you started using medical cannabis?
Well, for one thing, it stabilizes mood. So I'm able to talk about things. I'm able to listen to other people's lived experience and stories without getting all like consumed with the emotion. Like I can look at things from a different perspective, for instance, um, to get a better night's sleep. Like cannabis helps to modulate mood and to also help with the nightmares and the flashbacks. The
Mhm.
THC does.
Right.
And one has to be very careful though. And there's so many people out there self-medicating and they really don't know what they're doing. And it's very dangerous now to take any kind of anything from Smiley on the street corner. I say don't take anything because we have lots of things that are laced now with fentanyl, like
Right. Scary.
fake Tylenols, fake Percocets, fake opioids, that people, so we have to be extremely careful
Right.
and talking to our children and our next generations
Hmm.
and seniors too.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it's a very powerful drug that needs the attention of doctors and pharmacists.
Well, it's interesting too because on that same note, I think there was, at least this is something that I've heard, that when cannabis, that there's such a stigma
Mhm.
around
Oh,
cannabis
yeah.
because way back in the day when paper was a big thing and being invented, they were actually going to originally use hemp for paper, which for anybody who doesn't know, hemp is another part of the marijuana plant. But the tree, like lumber companies, wanted them to use trees for paper instead. So they put together this whole propaganda campaign against hemp, against the plant itself, so that it would be an outlawed plant, so that it wouldn't be used for paper, and instead they would use the trees. So obviously that is a for-profit move for the lumber companies. But ever since then, and when you look at some of the old like propaganda videos that they put out,
No.
they're like kind of ridiculous to watch now.
So
But that's a big
that's
reason that
good.
there's a
Yeah.
bunch of stigma around it too.
Right. You're right. So I'm glad you know that because many people don't, right? And my dad would say, and his generation, and still doctors to this day, they say, oh, it's the devil weed and it could lead to heroin addiction and dangerous drugs. In fact, cannabis is an exit drug.
Right.
It's not a gateway drug, as they say.
Mhm.
It helps people reduce their like if somebody needed pain medications, they could actually add cannabis to their treatment protocol and reduce their deadly pain medications.
Right.
And and some of those pain medications, as I might have said, can come with suicidal ideation, or they make you want to kill yourself. And some of them can blow out your liver if you
Right.
take too many for a long term, right? So a cannabis is a much safer option. But the doctors, okay, the reason why it works so well with various human conditions is because how shall I say the endocannabinoid system was discovered in 1988. It's the
Okay.
largest monumental system in the human body. It's responsible for balancing all the other systems in our body, like our endocrine system, digestive system, respiratory system. And yet it is not taught in most med schools.
Yeah, I was gonna
Why?
say this is the first time I've heard of it.
Yeah, I know, but most people don't know about that either. It's a
Yeah.
monumental part of human physiology. So,
Wow.
and then let's think about this, because that means that most doctors are missing critical education about basic human physiology. Like that's appalling to me. And they're starting to realize it now. The
Mhm.
doctors are learning from their patients.
Right.
That's how it's going right now. We got generations of conversations to have here
Hmm.
because the war on drugs was really it I can't imagine the damage done has been comprehensive to mostly, black, brown, and indigenous populations, Hispanic populations, and Chinese communities here in Canada. Terrible.
Hmm.
The stigma that is attached to this God-given plant
Right.
that really has the potential to help how I'd say it doesn't cure anything, but what it does is it minimizes suffering. That's what it does.
Yeah, that's a
And
great way
one
to
has to
put it.
be very careful. One has to be very careful and get someone to guide them if their doctor doesn't know how
Right.
to do that, right? And
Yeah.
one has to also know how to ask the right questions to their doctors. And
Hmm.
so anyway, that's what I do. I
Yeah.
help guide people through the maze of legal and medical, um, whatever. What's the word I'm looking for? Guiding through the maze of legal and medical.
Like
Uh,
trails, paperwork,
yeah, that's it.
maybe. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because that can
yeah,
be really confusing. The medical system on a good
yeah.
day can be really confusing.
Right.
Especially in the US, there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. It can be really expensive also. So I think having
Yeah,
that guidance in
right.
place is very beneficial. So for everybody listening, we will put all of Sherry's contact info at the end. We'll talk a little bit more about where you can reach her at the end, and just in case you need a little help with exactly what we're talking about. Just real quick, I do want to jump back to what you were saying with your sexual assault, how it was by your doctor. A
Hmm.
few points there too that you brought up. One, Sherry, to remind everybody, was 38, she said, when this happened to her. So I think
Hmm.
lots of times people think of sexual assault happening to younger people,
Right.
but I think that's a good reminder that it can happen to you at any age. It does not matter because, again, going back to what we said before, it's not about what somebody looks like. It's not about lust. It's about control and it's about power. But on that same note, it actually happened by somebody who is in a position of power and somebody that you should inherently be
Yes.
able to trust, right? So that kind of reminds me of I saw this TikTok recently. It was this lady talking about how she works or she used to work at a high security prison and they had to
Yeah.
keep specific inmates in a separate sector because they were the ones that sexually assaulted children. And if you guys aren't familiar, in prisons, that's a big no-no. They're
Mhm.
like those people are recognized as monsters,
Mhm.
obviously, and so they're kept separate from other inmates so that the other inmates don't kill them. But she said that she worked she was assigned to that specific unit one time, and it was shocking to her because they were outwardly like the nicest people, the kindest people that she had ever met. They were very polite, and I think that just goes to show that lots of times the monsters don't look like monsters, right? They look like people that we can trust, and I think that's the scary part, and that's
Mhm.
why you were saying that you trusted your intuition up until that point. I mean, it's not your intuition's fault. I think it's just the fact that those people have put on a really good facade because that's part of the play, right? Is getting people to trust them. So can you talk about that a little bit, maybe, Sherry, about that aspect of it?
Yeah, it's really hard to trust after that because this often happens, like you said, this is all about power and control.
Right.
And it's often like a power imbalance, like the doctor, patient, teacher, student,
Mm-hmm.
priest, and you
Acolyte,
know, yeah,
whatever the word should be.
right, it's everywhere. And unfortunately, in Canada, we have a problem here in with sports, in Hockey Canada, for instance,
Oh, interesting.
or the Canadian military, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so often the perpetrators get even promoted or transferred, and the victims are left, in shock without any resources to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I come in. I help to guide people if they've been in a situation like that. And often if you're in, the shock is so pervasive and painful, you can't think straight when you're in a state like that. So you need someone to help you, first of all, to listen and to help figure out what do we do next.
Yes.
Often we can't think straight, like,
Mm-hmm.
in that situation
Right.
when in shock, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel, conflicted about talking about all this stuff because I know it is so upsetting. It's an upsetting conversation,
Mhm.
but we have to know that there is hope,
Right.
and to suppress it is really not good.
Right.
And then what people do is typically they self-medicate. Maybe they start drinking too much, or maybe they start taking too many opioids to numb their pain, or as sleeping pills, antidepressants. But that just takes you down a much worse road,
Right.
much worse. We
Yeah.
try to do it as naturally and as holistically as possible. That includes diet, exercise, as you know,
Yeah.
and coaching. And coaching, that's what you do, right?
Yes.
So I'm
Yeah.
really happy to meet you because really what we need is more people like you in the world.
Right. And you mentioned that before too, that support is so important in a situation like this.
Mhm, mhm,
And I think that's 100% true because our bodies hold on to
mhm.
emotions. So these
Yes.
things can, if you don't deal with them, and yes, it is triggering sometimes to talk about it. But as you said, it's worse to suppress it because if you don't deal with it, it gets worse and they kind of build upon each other and those triggers get more and more frequent, right? And interesting, I think it's really interesting too, the correlation between PTSD and sexual assault. So
Mhm.
I'm sure you know this already, Sherry, but for our listeners, actually the most common cause of PTSD in women is due to sexual assault, more so even than natural disasters, than women in combat, than severe accidents. It's sexual assault, which is really scary. And
Right.
actually, an estimated 50% of sexual assault survivors will develop PTSD at some point in their lives, whether it's
Mhm.
now or somewhere down the road, whether it's from the act itself or during the trial where you have to relive it happening to you over and over again, like you said,
Right.
Sherry.
Right.
So I'm so glad to have you on here talking about it because it's just so important for people's mental health and overall well-being.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and we really have to start talking about this in the workplace too. You
Hmm.
know, I've tried for years to get people to talk about mental health first aid. You know how in a lot of companies they do first aid training and everything, but we need our senior managers and senior leaders uh, to learn, to be trained, to be trauma informed, to understand that, like, there's a lot of people now in Canada and the United States who are highly traumatized,
Right.
and nobody's getting the correct help they need. So what do we do? You know, we got people escaping from different countries, escaping violence. We have to figure out the supports to help people integrate back into society and not become, homeless or drug addicted or violent. And
Hmm.
I think the root cause of all this drug addiction and homelessness, if we do a root cause analysis, it all goes back to some kind of trauma.
Right.
Somebody, maybe has childhood trauma, or somebody, maybe had to escape from violence from a different. So we do a root cause analysis. Yeah, it's likely.
Hmm.
Yeah. And women, isn't it awful? Women, when we go out to have a drink or something, we have to be very mindful, be
Yeah.
careful of our drinks. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, it's a scary time.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have to tell my granddaughter that, or I
Right.
wish I didn't have to tell my daughter that, or when you're out with others, you got to be very mindful if you go to the bathroom. And
Hmm.
this is, I wish we could figure out a solution to this. I don't
Hmm.
like the idea of taking your drink to the bathroom either, but
Right.
we have to be very mindful about what, our surroundings and help each other.
Hmm.
Like I remember years, I've seen it all. Like over the years, I've worked in private industry and with the federal government, and I've seen it all. Like women getting stalked in the hallway, or groped in the photocopy room or something. That stuff has to stop.
Yeah.
You know, and I know so many lovely, respectful men in my network. I think we got to start highlighting the respectful men too that are helping us along our journey, because not all men are predators.
Yeah.
Most are not. Most are not. I would believe most are good people. So we don't want to, and so many men have been sexually assaulted too, but
Hmm.
it's very extremely hard for them to come forward.
Hmm.
So they often don't, but
That is such a good point that you bring up
yeah.
that I think recently um there's been this misconception about men and the role they play, and I think a lot of men struggle with feeling ashamed about just being a man, which is not what anybody should feel, right? Because all of men are taking the fall for this select group of people
Yeah.
that um, are not good people, right? The select few that are doing the bad things, I think a lot of the rest of men are taking the fall for it, which just isn't
Yeah.
fair. So
Right.
to your point, Sherry, I think changing the narrative around that first and foremost is going to help a lot because there's a lot of men out there that, and as you said, most of them, I would argue, are good people.
Yeah.
They step up when they need to. So, one
Mhm.
example of men stepping up, right? I was at a bar once with my friends. There was this guy. I won't do the whole story. We don't need to go to the details. But essentially, he was grabbing my arm and he wouldn't let me go. And for me, it got really scary because I mean, really, in most instances, a man, no matter how like small he is, can overpower a woman. Their biology is just different. They're
Yeah.
stronger.
That's right.
So it got scary for me that he was just holding on to my arm and wouldn't let me go and wouldn't let me get away, even though I repeatedly told him to let me go. But in that moment, two other guys that were there like kind of noticed what was going on and they intervened and they got him off of me and gave me enough time to get away from this guy. So I share this,
Wonderful. Yeah,
not
that's
to trigger
wonderful.
anybody, but
No,
to
I
say
love it.
that yes,
Mhm.
there's dudes out there that don't understand how to handle themselves, but there's also a lot of men out there that do step up to the plate and do support women and do show you that there's that good side to them too.
Right. There's so many lovely, respectful men in the world, in my life too, and I'm so grateful for them. But yeah, we gotta be alert all the time. Unfortunately, you're right. Men and women can never be equal. I
Right.
don't think. I don't think men are afraid to walk at night. I never go out at night alone. I won't go out at night. And I won't for sure drive alone if I'm going, out anywhere. And so men, I think that men cannot become pregnant accidentally, for instance. So
Right.
they'll never be equal, you know.
Right.
I really work with an organization too called Abuse Hurts. And there are some women who became pregnant from their abuser, their assaulter,
Hmm.
and they have a baby to raise. This
Yeah.
is this is stuff we gotta think about. And some of them, if they come from different parts of the world, would be shamed in their families, so they
Right.
sometimes abandon the babies.
Right.
And I mean, it's just like there's like layers and layers of things that
So many.
happen to women.
Right.
Men cannot be in that situation.
Right.
And yeah, and so we really have to figure out how to teach our young children at an early age, respect, and to celebrate our differences,
Right.
and to know what is bad behavior at a very early age,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I feel like
But
that's where
then,
it starts is with the parents and how you're raising your kids, right? Um,
yeah,
and to your point, I mean, I feel like men and women, I feel like they can be like equal, but they have different roles and different things that they're good at. And I think we misinterpret it where I want to do everything that you do, which speaking personally, I do not want to do everything that a man does. Like my
right,
dad, my brother, they're excavators, they have to shovel rocks. I'm like, that is not something that I personally am interested in. They're just going to be better
right,
at that because they're stronger
right,
biologically. But
right,
I think men and women are equal, but they're just good at different things. And I think to your point, it's time we start celebrating those differences
yeah,
instead of trying to shame people for those differences.
yeah, that's it. That's it. And the men that have been assaulted, it's usually by other men.
Mhm.
You know, I'm very grateful that I have this opportunity to talk to you again about this. And I really do, that's for that reason, I talk to a lot of women and men, but mostly women and girls, and try to help get them to, like I've heard you say, to advocate for themselves,
Right.
right? And to find the strength to not be aggressive, but be assertive. There's
Right.
a difference. There's a
Yes.
difference, right? There's a difference.
Yes. Beautifully said.
So I wish I had those skills. I wish somebody told me. I wish I had a me when I was your age, or
Hmm.
no, when I was a lot younger, right? But
Right.
even that, I was telling Allison, my friend Allison Murden, who you know, I
Hmm.
was telling her that the other day, and then we were talking, and I said, "Yeah, but how do you?" She said maybe you should tell your young women friends to take martial arts. Well, martial arts can't protect you against drugs. If
Right.
somebody drugs you, you can't,
Right.
how do you protect yourself against that?
Right.
Which is what happened. And she goes, oh yeah, right, right. We have to, we have to talk about these things that nobody wants to talk about.
Right.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so that's it. I'm gonna go to the end of my days, like talking and trying to be the voice for others,
Hmm.
because so many people won't talk about it for various reasons, and for good reasons too.
I think that's the beautiful thing about what you do because you said that you wish that you had somebody like you when you were
Yeah.
younger.
Mhm.
But the beautiful thing is that you got to be that person now for other
Mhm.
people so that pain doesn't have to keep spreading. And I think
Right.
that's so amazing in the work that you do because you give people that outlet. You are that person. You are that assertive female figure for women that they so desperately need, right? And even though unfortunately you didn't have that when you were younger, I think
No.
it's amazing that you get to be that person that you so desperately needed before.
Right.
And that's the beauty of it, right? Not to put a silver lining on anything that happened to you because obviously
Right.
it was all horrible and awful. And I wish it never would have happened to you, but I think you've done a great job turning that trauma into something productive and something that helps society better as a whole.
I think that I'm so like when I look back and I think now I have two women who they're now in their mid 30s,
Mhm.
but they've gone on to be psychologists,
Wow.
PhDs, and like to help other women. So that makes me so happy that just like, you could change the direction of somebody's life, and to go in and get the academic credentials to help other women, right? It's just amazing to me to hear that. But
Yeah.
well, when I hear the success stories, because often women go down a horrible different pathway, perhaps drug addiction and getting themselves into a bad relationship because they don't know anything about what healthy behavior is or healthy relationships, right?
Right.
Yeah, it takes, and a lot of women, if they are, this is the beauty of the internet now, because if women do not feel like they want to tell their friends, they could tell, somebody else, or me, for instance, or anyone, but it's good to get it out of your system. Don't carry it alone. It's
Yeah.
a very heavy burden,
Mm-hmm.
and it can cause disease,
Yeah.
and horrible physical problems. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying now to get everybody, to get mental health first aid training in the workplace and understand the difference between if your employee is having a panic attack
Yes.
or just being, I don't know, not getting her work done because of belligerence, for instance. You have to understand that there are many people that are out there that are highly traumatized, and you
Yeah.
never know. You never know, like you said, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's an PTSD is an invisible handicap, an
Mm-hmm.
invisible disability, and it's actually a brain injury.
Yeah.
And we all walk around, like I call them walking wounded.
Right.
Sometimes I could, tell that somebody is really suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like to go out and volunteer or just, offer my time. Let's go for coffee. Let's talk about what's going on and find out, and that often eases the burden of somebody that's going through or recovering from some horrible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, being sexually assaulted is worse. I've had somebody than being in a horrendous traffic accident, you
Mm-hmm.
know. It's horrible to have physical injuries, yes, but the psychological injuries,
Mm-hmm.
it's I
Yeah.
would say in my opinion a lot worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And it's just such an intimate trauma. It's
Yeah.
intimate in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Like you said, one, it is very intimate in a physical way, but I think it's even
Right.
more intimate in a
Yeah.
psychological way because
Right.
I believe you mentioned this before. It strips away all your
Yeah.
trust and all your
Yeah.
security, and the world
Yes.
afterwards feels
Exactly.
very unsafe when that happens.
Exactly. Exactly. Very unsafe. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
So, quick question, Sherry. I know that we're coming up on the end of our time here, but what are your hopes for the future regarding societal attitudes towards survivors of sexual assault and anybody who is experiencing PTSD?
My hope for the future,
Yes.
I'm going to be talking a lot more publicly at events and talking about healthy ways to heal from trauma. And I don't say go take medical cannabis, especially if you're under the age of 25. No, no, no. But for people over the age of, well, I would say even 21, yes, if you have high anxiety or if you need, and try to find like a buddy. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to tell a parent if you don't want to, or a psychologist, but try to find a buddy somewhere, or two, maybe. I
Hmm.
don't know, or try to volunteer. I think that society really has to think about how do we help those recover. You cannot have a society where we have, here in Canada, we have 30 people dying a day of opioid overdoses, accidental. And they're often, children or people between the ages of, 11 and 17,
Wow.
and accidental because there's this horrible drug toxic stuff in the street now. So to have the discussions, talk about things, and I'm going to be involved in several very public medical conferences and talking about mind matters, like mental health matters. And we have to start talking about healthy ways to heal from trauma. Like, uh, and we need, like I said, we do need opioids from time to time, but short term, we need diet, exercise, and community.
Right.
And what we're doing now is building the community of women. I get to talk to women all over the world. It's amazing. It's just wonderful. And all age groups too, right? We all have different perspectives.
Right.
So it's wonderful. I just love what you're doing. I think it's amazing. And like I
Oh.
said, we need more people like you. So,
Well, we need more people like you, Sherry. You're doing so much work here. As you said, you have so many really exciting things coming up. Just to wrap up the episode here, For anybody who's listening who may be a survivor themselves or is close to somebody or knows somebody that is also a survivor, because this is more common than we may think, what
Yeah.
last words or what last message or advice would you leave for them?
Just know that there is hope. There is hope. If, you know, like try to find a buddy system, or anybody that comes from you, if you refer, I'll give them a complimentary telephone call. We can chat on the phone if you'd like. Because I often do pro bono work for women who really, struggle. And then I just guide them through, they don't have to, because a lot of people don't want to tell their mom, they don't want to tell their doctor, they don't want to tell their husband, they don't want to tell their employer. And in
Right.
my case, I had to, my
Yeah.
employer, because it was my story got written in 2018 about the doctor, got written in the local media.
Oh, wow.
And then I got to just tell you quickly,
Yes, please
I
do.
don't I don't know if you saw a recent article
I
in
did.
our
Yes. And I wanted to bring
National
that up.
Post magazine. Well, we got to talk a little bit about this if you have time,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
this was an incident. I worked part-time for the federal government, and during pandemic, we were doing Zoom calls or through Microsoft Teams, and some a research scientist stood up naked from the waist down
Oh my God.
on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So to me, that was an assault on my nervous system.
Hmm.
Some people would say, oh, well, it's just like some guy streaking on a football field. No,
Yeah.
that was an assault. This was 10 o'clock in the morning. I
Yeah.
didn't want to have that. And then also it triggers other stuff that happened. And
Right.
that was 4 years ago. So I'm still in that process right now, and we're figuring out a better a department for me to work in, let's say.
Yeah.
Right now we're figuring it all out, but all I'm saying is you can't minimize these things. You can't say, oh well, it was on a Zoom call, it wasn't in real life. But the vision of that
Right.
was just set me just,
Hmm.
Anyway, so my reaction was very, very strong. It put me into relapse, triggered a lot of nightmares, and then intrusive thoughts, and what else? Reminders of the 10 years in court I had. Here we go again.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think so I think to myself to end, I think that sometimes I used to think, wow, am I being punished here? What's happening? Is the universe punishing me? And I think, no, now at this age, I was being prepared,
Okay.
because I may not have the academic credentials that you do, but I have a PhD in life experience,
Yes.
right? So I think all those experiences gave me it was preparing me to
Hmm.
be able to help others. And
Yeah.
that's what I want to leave it on. Be of service to others if you can. If you don't have if you don't know what you want to do in life, try to volunteer, for a women's shelter, or I don't say like I did, I went to work for a funeral home, but that's not easy. But if you could, like, that's where you get to meet people in their raw
Hmm.
moments that trust you, and it's a privilege. It really is.
Yeah.
And well, we learn by talking with others, right? So
Yeah. Absolutely. Such amazing points, and a few things there too. One, also why it's not like I don't consider that streaking across a football field, because one, like, what was the purpose of being naked on a Zoom call? I feel like personally, I'm like, you were doing something weird that is inappropriate that you should not have been doing. So I think you have
right.
every right to feel uncomfortable in that situation, especially since it triggered
Mhm.
reactions for your PTSD. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that people need to be more cognizant of, especially in the workplace, because
Mhm.
as you alluded to, people are scared of retaliation in their workplace if
Right.
they bring up situations like this, so they
Right.
suffer in silence. But as you said, such good points that there is hope. You don't have to suffer in silence. Sherry
Right.
is an
Right.
amazing resource for people who are right now struggling in silence and do not want to anymore. But also how you had that beautiful mindset shift of I'm not being punished but prepared. I think that's
Yeah.
something that we all can learn from. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for
Thank
sharing that
you.
with us, Sherry.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. This is so important. I'd love to do it again. We'll have a follow-up maybe,
Yes.
if
Oh
that's
my gosh, that
okay.
would be amazing. I would love to do a follow-up because this was such a wonderful conversation. And Sherry,
Yeah.
you are an amazing human being. You just have
Thank
light
you.
coming off of you in all
Thank you.
directions.
Thank you.
So for the people listening, how can they get in contact with you? Where can they follow you and get more of your content as well?
Mostly on LinkedIn. I talk to people all over the world and doctors that specialize in helping people with PTSD. Or if
Perfect.
you want, you can email me at, I call it now Sherry's Choice at proton.me.
Great.
Sherry's Choice. Because I'm starting now to recommend different products and services and things that I have tested myself and that I have vetted, like companies that I like. So we call it Sherry's Choice. Sherry's Choice at proton.me. That's my
Amazing.
address.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
So I will include a link to Sherry's LinkedIn in the show notes. I will include that email that she just told me so you guys have access to that. Sherry is also the host of her own podcast. So
Yeah.
I will include a link to her podcast as well so that you guys can take a listen. It's an amazing podcast. As she said, she talks to doctors from around the world on this podcast, and it's very, very interesting. So I'll put that in there as well. And I actually will include a link to that latest article that Sherry mentioned as well, because it's worth a read. And if you're going through a similar situation, again, just know that there's support for you out there. So if you are struggling, Sherry is an amazing person. She's an amazing choice for you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sherry. This was wonderful. And yes, we will have to do this again. So I'm going to say we will see you next time. And for everybody listening, thank you for sticking with us through this. And if you need any support again, feel free to reach out to Sherry or myself. All that information will be in the bio. But goodbye, you guys. I love you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Stay well.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked what you heard, then go ahead and subscribe so you get updates with us every week. You can also follow us on Instagram at KRC Coaching. If you're interested in working one-on-one, then go ahead and visit our website, krccoaching.com, to book your first 30-minute session for free. All right, thanks so much, you guys. Love you. Bye.